I stood alone in the church parking lot, hearing the wedding music drift through the stained glass windows. 17 years. 17 years of raising Mia since she was 3 years old. The late nights holding her through fevers. The driving lessons. The homework struggles. The graduation speeches where she thanked me publicly. Today was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life. Instead, I watched through the glass doors as another man walked my daughter down the aisle. A man who disappeared before she could even say his name. Before I share what happened next, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you have stepchildren or if you are a step-parent yourself, I would love to hear your thoughts. Please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories. Now let me tell you how I ended up walking away from my own daughter's wedding and why I refused to pay a single dollar when the bill came due. I met Linda at a small coffee shop in Portland, Oregon during the spring of 2007. She was working behind the counter pulling double shifts just to keep the lights on at home. Her daughter Mia was 3 years old at the time, a tiny girl with big brown eyes and curly hair that never stayed in place. She clutched a worn teddy bear everywhere she went and hid behind her mother's legs whenever a stranger came too close. Linda told me about Derek on our third date. He was Mia's biological father, a man who fancied himself a musician with dreams bigger than his talent. When Mia was just 6 months old, Derek packed a bag, mumbled something about making it big in Los Angeles, and vanished. No child support, no phone calls, no birthday cards. He simply erased himself from their lives like they never existed. I fell in love with both of them. Linda with her tired smile and fierce independence. Mia with her shy giggles and the way she slowly warmed up to me over months of patience. I remember the first time she let me read her a bedtime story. She sat rigid in her bed, watching me carefully as if waiting for me to disappear too. I promised myself I never would. 2 years later, I proposed to Linda in our tiny apartment kitchen while Mia sat at the table eating cereal. The moment Linda said yes, Mia looked up at me with those enormous eyes and asked a question that changed my life forever. She said, "Does this mean you will be my daddy now?" I knelt down beside her and told her yes. If she wanted me to be her daddy, I would be honored. She threw her arms around my neck, getting milk from her spoon all over my shirt, and I did not care one bit. That was the moment I became her father in every way that mattered. We made it official 6 months after the wedding. I filed the adoption papers and went through every legal step to make Mia my daughter. Linda wanted Mia to keep her last name for family reasons, and I agreed without hesitation. The name did not matter to me. What mattered was the little girl who started calling me Dad and meant it with her whole heart. The years that followed were everything I ever wanted. I taught Mia to ride a bicycle in the park near our house. She fell 7 times before she got it right, and each time she got back up with more determination. I sat through every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game where she spent more time picking dandelions than chasing the ball. I did not care. I was there. When Mia was 7, she caught a terrible flu that turned into pneumonia. I spent 3 nights sleeping in a hospital chair beside her bed, holding her small hand and promising her everything would be okay. Linda had to work, so I took time off and stayed. Mia later told me she remembered waking up scared in the middle of the night and seeing me there, and that was when she knew I would never leave her. At 16, I taught her to drive. Our first lesson ended with her backing into a trash can at approximately 2 miles per hour. We sat in the driveway laughing until tears rolled down our faces. She made me promise never to tell anyone, and I kept that promise until right now. Her high school graduation remains one of the proudest days of my life. Mia gave a speech as class salutatorian, and at the end, she thanked her mother for her strength and her father for never giving up on her. She looked right at me when she said it. I cried in front of 300 people and did not care who saw. When Mia turned 12, I opened a savings account specifically for her future wedding. Every month, I deposited whatever I could spare. Sometimes $50, sometimes $200. Over the years, it grew into a substantial sum. I wanted her to have the wedding of her dreams without worrying about cost. That was my gift to her, planned over a decade in advance. Mia met Kyle during her junior year at college. They were both business majors with similar ambitions and complementary personalities. Kyle came to dinner at our house and impressed me with his firm handshake, his direct eye contact, and the way he looked at my daughter like she was the most important person in the room. A year later, Kyle called me on a Saturday afternoon. His voice was nervous as he asked if we could meet for coffee. I knew what was coming before he said a word. He wanted my permission to propose to Mia. Not Derek's permission, mine. He told me that I was the father Mia always talked about, the man who shaped who she became. He wanted my blessing. I gave it to him gladly. 2 weeks later, Mia called us crying happy tears with a ring on her finger. The wedding was set for the following June, and I told her not to worry about a single expense. I had been preparing for this moment for years. The budget I calculated came to approximately $45,000. I was ready to spend every penny. The trouble began 6 months before the wedding. Mia came home one Sunday afternoon looking distracted, her phone clutched in her hand. She told us that Derek had found her on social media. He sent a message saying he wanted to reconnect, that he had changed, that he regretted missing so many years. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. I told Mia that it was her decision to make, but she should be careful. People who abandon their children rarely change overnight. She nodded and said she understood, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. The little girl who used to ask why her real daddy did not want her still lived somewhere inside the confident young woman before me. They started meeting for lunch, then coffee, then shopping trips. Derek apparently worked as a bartender now, his music career having crashed and burned years ago. He told Mia stories about his struggles, his failed marriages, his regrets. He painted himself as a victim of circumstances rather than a man who made selfish choices. I watched my daughter get pulled in deeper each week. She started checking her phone constantly during family dinners, smiling at messages I knew came from him. She talked about Derek's opinions on things, quoted his advice, mentioned his name more and more. Linda noticed too. We had a quiet conversation one night after Mia went home to her apartment. Linda was worried. She had seen this pattern before, the charm offensive. The sympathy plays, the gradual manipulation, but I told her to stay calm. Mia was an adult now. She needed to figure out who Derek really was on her own terms. I believed our 17 years together would speak louder than his 6 months of attention. I was wrong. 3 months before the wedding, we held a planning meeting at our house. Mia, Kyle, Linda, and myself sat around the dining room table with binders full of vendor information and seating charts. Everything was coming together beautifully until Mia cleared her throat and made an announcement. She wanted to invite Derek to the wedding. I nodded and said that was fine. He was her biological father, and it made sense for him to be there. But then she continued. She wanted Derek to sit in the front row on the bride's side of the church. I felt something twist in my chest, but I agreed. Linda's mother, Ruth, who we called Grandma Ruth, was visiting that day. I saw her frown from across the room, but she kept silent. 2 months before the wedding, Mia asked to change the invitations. She wanted Derek listed as father of the bride alongside my name. I swallowed hard and said okay. I told myself it was not a competition. There was room for both of us. 1 month before the wedding, Mia informed us that Derek would be giving a speech at the reception. I learned this through Linda because Mia did not tell me directly. I pretended it did not sting. I pretended I was fine. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mia called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice sounded different. Colder somehow. More distant. She told me she had made a decision about the ceremony. Derek would be the one to walk her down the aisle. I could not speak for several seconds. When I found my voice, I asked her what she meant. She explained it simply, as if discussing the weather. Derek was her real father. She wanted her real father to walk her down the aisle. She asked if I understood. I asked her what I was supposed to do during the ceremony. She told me I could sit with the other guests. Then she added that Derek would also handle the father-daughter dance. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I heard Linda gasp beside me. 17 years of memories flashed through my mind. Every bedtime story. Every scraped knee. Every tear I wiped away. Every check I wrote for her education. Every promise I kept. All of it dismissed in a single phone call. I told Mia I needed time to process this. She said she hoped I would understand and hung up. Linda was crying. I just stood there feeling hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only the shell. Grandma Ruth called that night. Her voice was thick with anger. She told me this was not right, that Mia was making a terrible mistake, that Derek did not deserve any of this. I thanked her for saying so, but I did not know what to do. I did not want to ruin my daughter's wedding by making demands. I thought maybe I should just accept my reduced role and be grateful I was invited at all. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Clear blue sky temperature in the low 70s, a gentle breeze that carried the scent of the flowers arranged outside the church. I put on the suit I had bought specifically for this occasion, a charcoal gray 3-piece that cost more than I usually spent on clothes in an entire year. I wanted to look my best for my daughter's wedding, even if my role had been diminished to that of a regular guest. I arrived at the church early. Derek was already there, strutting around in a rented tuxedo like he owned the place. He shook hands with people he had never met, introduced himself as the father of the bride, accepted congratulations he did not earn. I watched from a distance, my hands clenched at my sides. When I tried to enter the bridal suite to see Mia before the ceremony, a bridesmaid stopped me at the door. She said only the father of the bride was allowed inside right now. I told her I was her father. She looked uncomfortable and said Mia had specifically requested only Derek be present. I stood in that hallway listening to my daughter laugh with a man who had abandoned her, and something inside me cracked. The ceremony began at 2 p.m. I found my seat in the 3rd row, not even close to the front where family should sit. Linda sat beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly her knuckles turned white. Grandma Ruth sat behind us, and I could feel her disapproval radiating like heat. The music swelled. The doors opened. Derek walked Mia down the aisle with the biggest smile I had ever seen on his face. He waved to people. He posed for photographs. He acted like he had been there all along, like the past 17 years of absence meant nothing. I watched the woman I raised glide past me without a single glance in my direction. She did not look at me. She did not acknowledge me. I might as well have been a stranger off the street. During the vows, I held myself together. During the readings, I maintained my composure. But when Mia stood up to give her speech, thanking everyone who made this day possible, I felt the last threads of my self-control begin to fray. She thanked her mother for her sacrifice and strength. She thanked Kyle for his love and partnership. She thanked Kyle's parents for welcoming her into their family. Then she thanked Derek for coming back into her life. She said his return had given her a sense of completeness she never knew she was missing. She did not mention me. Not once. Not even a passing reference to the man who raised her. Linda squeezed my hand so hard I thought my fingers might break. I heard Grandma Ruth whisper something under her breath that was definitely not appropriate for church. The reception followed at a venue I had selected and paid a deposit for 8 months earlier. White linens, crystal chandeliers, a 5-tier wedding cake, and a live band playing jazz standards. Everything Mia had dreamed of, funded entirely by the savings account. I started when she was 12 years old. Then came the father-daughter dance. Derek led Mia to the center of the floor as the band played a classic song. I watched them sway together. Derek grinning for the cameras, Mia looking up at him with admiration. I remembered teaching her to dance in our living room when she was 10. She stepped on my feet constantly, but we laughed through every mistake. I told her that someday she would dance with me at her wedding and I would try not to cry. She promised she would save the first dance for me. That promise apparently meant nothing now. I stood up quietly and walked outside. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to not watch another second of this charade. The parking lot was empty and silent. I leaned against my car and stared at the sky, asking myself where I had gone wrong. What had I done to deserve this? How had 17 years of love and sacrifice been erased by 6 months of charm from a man who never changed a single diaper? My phone buzzed. A message from the wedding planner asking about the final payment. The venue needed the remaining balance settled before the night ended. $47,000 total for everything. She asked if she should charge my card on file. I stood there for a long time, reading that message over and over. I thought about all the years I had saved for this day. I thought about the sacrifices I made, The overtime I worked, the vacations Linda and I skipped so Mia could have her perfect wedding. I thought about being relegated to the third row, about being locked out of the bridal suite, about being erased from my own daughter's gratitude. Then I thought about Derek in his rented tuxedo, accepting praise he never earned, taking credit for a daughter he never raised. I typed my response carefully. I told the wedding planner not to charge my card. I told her the father of the bride would handle the payment. Then I got in my car and drove home. On the drive back, I finally let myself cry. Not because of the money. I would have happily paid 10 times that amount to walk Mia down the aisle. I cried because 17 years of being her father apparently counted for nothing. I cried because the little girl who once asked if I would be her daddy had grown into a woman who threw me away the moment something shinier came along. Linda called while I was halfway home. She asked where I was. I told her I needed time alone and that I loved her. She did not push. She understood. Later, Linda told me what happened after I left. The reception ended around 10 at night. The venue manager approached Kyle asking for the final payment. When Kyle said my card was on file, the manager explained that I had specifically declined to pay and directed them to the father of the bride. Derek went pale. He stammered that there must be some mistake, that he thought everything was already covered. Kyle asked him directly if he had $47,000. Derek admitted he barely had $400 in his bank account. Chaos erupted. Mia started calling my phone repeatedly. I watched it ring from my living room and did not answer. Kyle ended up putting the immediate charges on his personal credit card while promising to pay the rest in installments. Derek slipped out sometime during the confusion and was not seen for the rest of the night. The perfect wedding ended in arguments about money and a missing biological father who vanished the moment responsibility appeared. Some things never change. The days after the wedding were quiet and heavy. I stayed home while Linda went back and forth between our house and Mia's apartment, trying to keep peace between two people she loved. Mia called me repeatedly. I was not ready to talk. Grandma Ruth came by with homemade chicken soup and a bottle of whiskey. She sat with me on the porch and said nothing for almost an hour. Finally, she told me that Mia would come around eventually, that young people make mistakes, that blood means nothing compared to the years I put in. I appreciated her words, but they did not fill the hollow space in my chest. Derek disappeared completely after the wedding. Mia tried calling him multiple times in the following days. He never answered. No text messages, no social media responses. He had gotten his photographs, his moment in the spotlight, and vanished back into whatever hole he had crawled out of. The pattern Linda warned about repeated itself perfectly. Kyle called me about a week after the wedding. He apologized profusely and said he had no idea how bad things had gotten. He promised to handle all the remaining wedding debt himself and asked nothing from me. I told him he was a good man and that none of this was his fault. 2 weeks after the wedding, there was a knock on my door. Mia stood on the porch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked smaller, somehow younger, like the little girl who used to hide behind her mother's legs. She started talking before I could say anything. She apologized for everything. For Derek walking her down the aisle. For excluding me from the bridal suite. For not mentioning me in her speech. For the father-daughter dance. For all of it. She told me that Derek had not responded to a single message since the wedding. She had tried reaching him every day with no success. She finally understood that he never cared about her. He only wanted the appearance of being a good father without any of the actual work. The moment there was a bill to pay or a problem to solve, he disappeared again. She asked me if I could ever forgive her. I did not answer immediately. I looked at this woman I had raised since she was 3 years old. I remembered every moment we shared. I also remembered standing alone in that parking lot, feeling like my heart had been ripped out. I told her the truth. I said I loved her, and I always would, but she had hurt me in a way I did not know was possible. I needed time to heal, and I could not pretend everything was fine when it was not. Mia nodded through her tears. She said she understood, and she would wait however long it took. She just wanted me to know how sorry she was. The months that followed were difficult but necessary. I started seeing a therapist to work through feelings I could not process alone. I learned that my pain was valid, That setting boundaries was not the same as being cruel, that loving someone did not mean accepting mistreatment. Mia and I began talking again slowly. Short text messages at first. Then phone calls. Then coffee dates where we sat across from each other and tried to rebuild what had been broken. It was not easy. Some conversations ended in tears. Others ended in long silences. But we kept trying. Kyle paid off the wedding debt without complaint. He told me once that he would spend the rest of his life making sure Mia appreciated what she had. I believed him. Mia wrote me a letter about 6 months after the wedding. 5 pages of memories and apologies. She wrote about me teaching her to ride a bike. About the hospital nights when I held her hand. About graduation day when she publicly called me her father. She wrote that Derek gave her life, but I gave her a childhood worth remembering. 1 year after the wedding, my phone rang on a Sunday morning. It was Mia, her voice trembling with excitement. She told me she was pregnant. She and Kyle were expecting their first child. Then she asked me a question that broke through every wall I had built around my wounded heart. She asked if I would like to be called Grandpa. I could not speak. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear and tears streaming down my face. After everything that happened, after all the pain and distance, she wanted me to be part of her child's life. Not Derek. Me. I told her yes. I told her I would be honored to be called Grandpa. Our relationship today is different than it was before. There are scars that will never fully disappear. Trust once broken takes years to rebuild, but we are trying. We are choosing each other every day, which is more than Derek ever did. He never contacted Mia again after the wedding. As far as I know, he moved to another state and returned to his pattern of abandoning anyone who needed something real from him. Some people never change. I learned something important through all of this. Being a parent is not about biology. It is about showing up. It is about the ordinary days, the difficult nights, the thankless moments that accumulate into a lifetime of love. But that love deserves respect. Walking away from that wedding was not revenge. It was self-preservation. It was teaching my daughter that even unconditional love has boundaries. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the past control your future. I have forgiven Mia. I have not forgotten what happened, but I have released the anger that was poisoning me from inside. Now I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, what would you have done? Would you have stayed and paid for everything despite being ignored? Or would you have walked away too? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real-life experiences. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Family is complicated, and sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who can hurt us deepest. Thank you for listening to my story. Whatever your family situation looks like, I hope you find the peace and respect you deserve. Take care of yourself.